Welcome back to Lower Keys Living, everybody. And if you're new to fishing the lower Florida Keys or want to improve your chances for a lot of action on the reefs, this episode is made specifically for you. All right, welcome back to Lower Keys Living, everybody. Here we are. I'm going to give you some of our favorite places to fish for yellowtail and other reef fish out here. I'm going to tell you what kinds of hooks and rigs we're using on this, and what we're using for bait and how we chum for these. So lots of information. So if you're new to fishing here in the lower Florida Keys, or you've been down here, haven't had a lot of luck, hopefully this information will get you on some fish and a lot of reef fishing action. So let's just jump right into this for you. So first up, this spot down here in the bottom left, I will show you. This is just off of Pelican Shoals right down here. If you've watched other videos, I'm out here a lot. One of my favorite actions, mainly because it's a little out of the way from every place else. So I am the only boat. Actually, I can't even say typically. When I fish this little spot in here, I've been the only person in this little gap I'm going to show you. The next up, here right off of Maryland Shoals, there is a little hump that rises from 80 feet on the north side up to 60 feet. It's like a big mound, and then it drops off to 130 to 180 feet on the south side, but a great little spot. My number one yellowtail spot is this location, about a mile southeast of the American Shoal Lighthouse. Another great spot for yellowtail and mutton snappers is just off of this reef up here off of Big Pine Key. And then finally, if you don't want to get offshore too far, want to stay in closer with the family, there's this little spot right up in here off the Kemp Channel that is great for yellowtail and cirro mackerel. So I'm going to show you some details on each of these spots and what makes them unique and what makes them special. But first, when I go out, I always bring 2 boxes of chum with me. Our water's warm, they tend to melt and disperse fast, so use that first box of chum is just getting established, starting to draw the fish up. And when I'm about 3/4 of the way through that first box of chum melting, I'll add the second box to give it a chance to start melting while that first box dissipates. But it gives you a nice long chum line. 2 boxes typically out here last me hour and a half of continuous fishing with a good solid chum line. So that's where I start with. Then I also bring out, if you've watched my other videos when I'm lobstering, if I've got smaller lobsters that I'm not keeping and cooking the carapace, I freeze those, crush those, and then I'll add those to a gallon bag and add some water to it and then freeze those solid. And I put that into my chum bag with the chum, and those frozen pieces sink to the bottom as they melt and disperse. And that really helps bring in the grouper, helps bring in the mutton snapper and the hog fish to right underneath the boat. So that gives me some bottom lines. And then finally, I always buy some cheap dog food. I'll fill up a gallon bag with it, add maybe a cup of water to it so it gets wet and freeze that. And then I add that to my chum bag. And what that does, when that defrosts, it tends to float on top. So the combination of these 3 items give you a really good 3-dimensional chum line. I don't know anybody else that uses this frozen dog food. I've told some of my fishing buddies about it. They haven't bothered with it, but it really works. It stays on top. It brings the fish to the surface. And the other thing it does, it'll bring in seagulls that'll start feeding on it. And when those seagulls are on the water, that draws more fish to the top because they want to see what's going on. Just always remember, action draws action. So the more action you have going on, it draws more action. So these are my 3 components, and it gives me a fully 3-dimensional layer of chum. Again, the frozen dog food stays on top. The crushed lobster carcasses tend to sink to the bottom. And the box of chums will just spread throughout the whole water column, especially depending on how fast the current is moving while you're fishing. Next thing I do, what I use for bait. I always bring frozen shrimp. That's my primary bait source out here. I'll use those on the hooks in the chum line. On the bottom, I like to use Almaco jacktails. You'll see as I'm fishing for mahi out along a lot of the weed lines, we end up with a lot of Almaco jack, and they are great eating fish. So I'll fillet some of those, and the ones I keep, I do cut the tails off. I freeze those, and I use those for bottom bait. The grouper and mutton snapper love those, so I do that. And then finally, In the chum line, a lot of these places you might end up with a ton of ballyhoo. Ballyhoo just are like little termites eating away at the frozen shrimp. So if I've got a lot of ballyhoo and I'm losing my shrimp and just left with nothing but a shell on the hook, I'll replace that with the frozen bonita or squid. Those are a little too tough for the bonita to eat. So it gives me a bait to replace the shrimp with in the chum line. For hooks, I always use these 1/32 ounce circle hooks up here, and these tend to stay in the chum line. And these I free line, leave my reel open, and just let those drift out with a chum line behind the bait. Then the next, and this is using 3 different rods every time. If there's 2 or more of us, we have 6 rods going, set on each side of the boat. I use these 16 ounce jigs, and these tend to stay in the chum line, but they'll stay in that bottom third of the chum line. I'll try and cast these out 30 to 40 feet behind the boat, and then I lock the reel, and then it'll drift and sink down through the chum line. But then the current, they're light enough that the current will keep it suspended in that chum line without letting it sink to the bottom. And then finally, I use these 3/4 ounce jigs with either a full shrimp or the Almaco jacktail or piece of squid, and I'll drop those straight down below the boat, and then I'll raise those 18 to 24 inches off the bottom. And those are what I catch my hog fish, the mutton snapper on, and the strawberry and black grouper. So it gives me a really good, again, 3-dimensional fishing, so we're catching all layers of the water out behind your boat. So let's look at this first spot. This is down here just off of Pelican Shoals, and I try and reference everything today from American Shoals Lighthouse. It's a prominent feature, so you can come right on down here. And again, if you've been with me, you've seen this spot before. So here it is up close. So this is Pelican Shoals. It used to be a bigger island. Hurricane Irma wiped it out. It used to be a big nesting spot for frigate birds. No more. It's underwater at high tide, but they do have mooring buoys out here on the west side, and there's a set out here on the front side. So if you'd like to get away from the crowd snorkeling at Looe Key, another great spot. But where I fish is over in this really unique channel. Got a good grab where everything coming out on the outgoing tide funnels down through here. And even without chum, there's lots of fish down here just feeding on what's drifting out with the current, because it tends to come out here and just pour down this channel. It's a great spot to anchor, nice sandy bottom, easy to get a good grip on the bottom right in here. And here are the coordinates for this location. This is an amazing spot for great yellowtail. Yellowtail will come in almost immediately when you start fishing. I've gotten some amazing hogfish in this spot. It's a great spot for strawberry grouper and mutton snapper. Really, really nice. And I've caught the occasional kingfish in here when I've just drifted some live bait behind the boat. So a really good active spot, just because, again, this current is going out and it just draws so much action into this location. I don't fish this on an incoming tide when the tide's coming this way. Really have not had a lot of luck here, but on the outgoing tide, the fish seem to know, and everything out here tends to gather up in this spot because it's just falling right through here. And again, last thing, I've caught some nice black grouper in here. And this spot is a little out of the way compared to everything else, so I have never seen anybody else anchored out here. So it's a good spot. Chances are, unless I'm out here, if you come out and you see the big yellow angler, you know I'm here, but I've never seen anybody else fishing in this location. So great spot to check out if you want some good action and a good variety of fish. So when I'm fishing off the bottom for the grouper or the hogfish or the mutton, again, 2 feet off the bottom with squid or the Almaco jacktails. The hogfish do prefer a whole shrimp, so if you want to target hogfish, a good bait to use there is put a whole piece of shrimp on. But for the grouper and the mutton, use those Almaco jacktails or a chunk of squid. And then use your shrimp in the chum line. And again, those 2 different hooks give you 3 dimension, and you're not going to be disappointed in this spot. Next spot is just a little further east from Pelican Shoals, up here at this Maryland Shoals area. And just south of American Shoals, there's a little rise, comes up to about 60 foot of depth. and you're 80 to 90 feet in this gap, and then it drops off to 130, 150 feet out here. So it's a nice mound, good depth all over. The nice thing about this is no matter which way the current or tide's going, your chum line's going to be dropping off into deeper water and drawing the bigger fish up to you. It is a really popular spot. There will be other boats out here on a nice day. So anchor up, take advantage of their chum lines, but a really good spot. Again, this is a great spot for flagged yellowtail. Lots of black grouper in this area. And again, kingfish and sailfish when I'm using live bait along with it. Don't do that very often. If I'm out looking for kingfish and sailfish, I'm generally trolling. But this is a common spot where I'll troll through this gap and circle around looking for sailfish and kingfish in here. If you saw my big sailfish video, I actually caught that sailfish right in here as I was going out to circle this spot. So great all-around spot. And again, this is not one that's going to disappoint, but well-known spot. It's usually pretty busy, but plenty of fish. All right, probably my number one spot for lots of action is right here. It's exactly a mile southeast of American Shoals Lighthouse. What makes this nice is it's really shallow, 15 to 20 feet deep, and then it just drops off the ledge here, one of the deeper drops. So especially on an outgoing tide, you can get lots of your chum going down deep, pulling those bigger bottom fish up to the top. So again, on an outgoing tide, I'll anchor in 30 to 40 feet. Incoming tide, I get a little deeper, 60 to 80 feet on the incoming tide. And here are the coordinates for this one. And this one does have lots of action, so it's really nice. Epic action out here. This one, yellowtail come up almost immediately as soon as you start chumming. They even have them coming up before the chum bag in just to see what's going on with the boat. It's another spot if you've got family, they want lots of action, you want to keep the kids entertained. This is it. Your family will have a blast. And the other thing we love to do is when we're out here fishing, we like to cool off, rinse off. So we'll head over to the lighthouse, anchor up over here at the lighthouse, and just snorkel around in here before we head in. So again, check this spot out if you've got family and want lots of action. And again, good hog fish spot, great black grouper spot. Get a lot of small strawberry grouper in here, but this spot's fished heavily, so those strawberry grouper tend to be really small since I don't have a size limit on those, and I don't keep any of the strawberry groupers anything less than 16 inches long. This next spot, this is almost directly south off of Little Palm Island off of Big Pine Key. Here's the dimensions. Really popular spot because it's an easy spot to access from most of the major channels here in the lower Keys, but an abundance of fish in this area. Here, you're going to be anchoring about 60 to 80 feet of water. Here is your GPS coordinates. And again, yellowtail, mutton snapper, hogfish abundant out here. One of my favorite spots to come out and fish for mutton snapper. And it's really popular, lots of boats, but this whole area, it's not limited to one pinpoint location, but this whole area out here is a great area. And then finally, this one, if you don't want to go so far offshore, you've got family that's a little nervous about going to the deeper water, or you've got kids and you want lots of easy fishing action, this is the spot. So this is Lowest Key right here, and Cudjoe Key is right here, Summerlin Key is right here. You've got the Kemp Channel flowing through, which brings lots of bait nutrients, so it draws a lot of fish. So here it is. There's a little wooden channel marker out here, the outer marker. In a satellite photo, you can see some of those other boats out here anchored fishing. And depth range is, if you get up at here, 8 feet, but if you get out to 10 feet to 25 feet deep, it's a grass sandy bottom, really easy anchoring. And your rough coordinates to be out here is phenomenal. But just on an outgoing tide, your chum line is going to go out and it's just going to bring more fish right up to the boat. And again, this is a great busy yellowtail spot. I don't think I've ever gotten a really big, what I'd call flag size, 20 plus inch yellowtail out here, but I do get a lot of keeper size, that 14 to 15 inch size range in here. Your kids will like it because they'll be really busy with lots of the smaller yellowtail. And this is also my favorite cirro mackerel spot. Gotta confess, one of my neighbors that's been down here fishing for generations introduced me to this spot for cirro mackerel. So just a great spot if you want to add that to your bucket list of items. But this is just a great inshore fishing spot. It's super fun for the whole family. Quick and easy to get out here. another spot. So hope this information helped you feel more comfortable about finding fish when you're down here. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week on Lower Keys Living.